Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Mr. Oler, I'd like to start with you. During the global COVID-19 pandemic, we know that the oil and gas industry has been hit hard. And we also know that during that time, your companies, America's natural gas companies, have been on the front lines working hard to try to ensure that Americans can have energy provided to their homes and so that our economy can continue to operate. But we also know that there is something of a shortage of pipelines in our country, particularly in some parts of the country, including the northeastern United States and places like Puerto Rico. We could solve this problem, of course, by allowing ships to carry LNG along the U.S. coast. The problem is, of course, the Jones Act. The Jones Act, which is about to celebrate its 100th birthday, I'd say that's 100 birthdays too many for the Jones Act, creates a significant problem here in particular. The Jones Act, of course, is this law that restricts shipping between U.S. ports to only those vessels that are U.S. built and U.S. flagged and U.S. crewed. Now, that might sound fine enough at the outset, and maybe in some instances, there are some people who would be okay with it. I personally don't see any need for it anywhere. I think it's a bad law. But no matter what, I think it's ridiculous to make the Jones Act apply even in those areas, even in those marketplaces where there is no Jones Act compliant vessel that is capable of carrying something, say, for example, LNG. As a result of this, predictably, U.S. markets have had to turn to other sources where they would otherwise be able to turn to a U.S. supplier. In many instances, they've had to import natural gas from foreign countries. Now, not just any foreign countries, but in many instances, it's had to be countries that are our geopolitical adversaries, countries like Russia and like Venezuela, rather than purchasing LNG from American suppliers. So my question for you is, in an unprecedented economic time, one in which Americans are facing job losses and other significant economic and personal challenges, wouldn't it make sense for us to take steps to ensure that oil and gas companies can meet U.S. demand before potentially forcing the U.S. into the arms of geopolitical adversaries like Russia and Venezuela?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think that all of us in this room have spent probably a great deal of our careers in public policy thinking about the United States dependency on foreign countries. And in a very short period of time, we've been able to turn that around. We're now the world leader in energy production. You mentioned the Northeast. Something that comes to my mind is we have one of the most prolific natural gas supply basins in Pennsylvania, which is a short drive from those northeastern states. And it's a supply basin that is creating jobs. It's domestic production. We've got very rigorous regulations surrounding that production and then transportation. But sometimes it is difficult to get new pipeline capacity built in order for those regions of the country that don't have that supply to take advantage of it, and then they're forced to turn to foreign suppliers or even fuel sources that are not as carbon friendly as natural gas is.
In that circumstance, in light of what you've described, wouldn't a temporary waiver of the Jones Act at least allow natural gas companies to be able better to access American markets that are otherwise difficult or in some cases impossible to access due to the Jones Act, or in some cases because of other infrastructure challenges?
Senator, on this particular issue, the Jones Act, as an association, we have not looked at that and taken a position on it. We certainly have heard about it and heard the concerns that you've articulated today. And so what I'd like to do is talk to our members and get back to your office on that legislation.
That'd be wonderful. And if you'd like me to visit more with you or with any of your members, I'd be honored and pleased to do that. I think your organization in particular is one that really ought to focus on this and could be a voice of clarity here. particularly if we're talking about this narrow area. I mean, why on earth would we want to be strengthening the hands of oppressive regimes in Russia and in Venezuela when we don't even have access to a single Jones Act compliant vessel that could take care of these markets? We've got an abundance of natural gas available in this very country. This is exactly the kind of crony capitalism that we should be on the lookout for. Now look, maybe 100 years ago Friday, when they passed this ill-fated, ill-conceived legislation written by the devil himself, maybe they had some good ideas. I don't know what they were. I do believe that those who are defending it to this day, especially in these extreme circumstances like what we're describing here, are being disingenuous. And I think it's time the American people understand it's not just American businesses that are being harmed. It's everyday consumers. And it's everyday American citizens whose safety and national security is jeopardized by our shameless commitment to a crony capitalist legal regime. Thank you very much.
Well, Senator, I have to comment here. As someone that does strongly support the Jones Act, and we worry about foreign dependence, whether it's on our shipping or whatever else, we start to close down U.S. maritime. We start to allow flag of conveniences to further dominate in this space. We don't supply good U.S. mariner jobs. When we need sea lift capacity in times of war, in times of national urgency, those foreign countries, those foreign vessels with foreign crews, I promise you, will not be there. This hearing is about protecting, promoting frontline workers. There's no better way to do it than protecting, promoting, quite frankly, expanding the Jones Act. And on its 100th anniversary on Friday, we will celebrate it as a landmark legislation that this committee and many on this committee support. Thank you.
Mr. Willis, I would ask you, I understand my time's expired, but how on earth can you justify, regardless of whether you believe the Jones Act is a good idea, which it is not, how on earth can you justify the application of this law forcing Americans to buy natural gas from Venezuela and Russia when there's not a single Jones Act compliant vessel in the United States capable of carrying this commodity that we so badly need? How can you justify that?
Senator Lee, we're going to ask the witness to take that for the record.